So, first of all, thanks for coming out on a rainy night. And thank you to Anthony Appiah and Cornel West for being here. It's an honor. I'm just going to say a few introductory words about our distinguished guests, and then also about Anthony Appiah's new book, Lines of Descent, W.E.B. Du Bois and the Emergence of Identity, which of course we're here to celebrate tonight. I've asked Professor Appiah then to tell us just a little bit about how he came to write the book, and the conversation will go from there. Okay. So it is our very good fortune to have both Anthony Appiah and Dr. Cornel West, truly two of this country's great public intellectuals, with us to discuss Lines of Descent. Anthony Appiah taught here at Princeton from 2002 until just the end of last year. He is now professor of philosophy and law at NYU. Professor Appiah is known for his contributions to African and African American studies, to political philosophy, to moral psychology. His many influential books include The Ethics of Identity, Cosmopolitanism, Ethics in a World of Strangers, and The Honor Code, How Moral Revolutions Happen. Anthony Appiah's awards and honors are far too many for me to list them here. Suffice it to say that in 2012, he received the National Humanities Award medal from President Obama. It's no easier, let me tell you, to do justice to Dr. Cornel's extraordinary work and influence than to Anthony Appiah's. We all know Dr. West as one of America's premier champions for racial and social justice. A teacher to so many, both inside and outside of the academy, one who walks the walk, if ever there was one. He is the author of many acclaimed books, including the contemporary classics Race Matters and Democracy Matters, as well as his memoir, Brother West, Living and Loving Out Loud. Dr. West, too, has recently moved from Princeton to New York, becoming professor of philosophy and Christian practice at Union Theological Seminary. He regularly speaks truth to power on television and radio, and it seems wherever he's needed. What an honor that the publication of Lines of Descent brings them both back to Princeton, and may they return often. If you think from looking at this that it is a small book, then you are deceived. It is an intellectual biography of one of the giants of African American history and thought, a man who lived from the Reconstruction to the March on Washington, and it is a book that fits Du Bois' stature. It traces the big questions that Du Bois asked all his life. Who am I as Black man and as American? What is a nation? What is race? What is Africa in history and in the collective imagination? What shapes identity? How is it possible to form and sustain a meaningful collectivity? And what is the specifically Black contribution to culture, even to humanity? You may remember one answer Du Bois gives to this last question regarding a Black contribution to culture from the souls of Black folk, namely, he writes, to make their loving, living, and doing precious to all human hearts. It's impossible not to hear in Dr. West's memoir an homage to Du Bois in the title of that memoir. It is a spiritual and aesthetic contribution perfectly expressed for Du Bois, not least in Black songs and folklore. In the terms of Anthony Appiah, that Anthony Appiah develops for us in Lines of Descent, the generalizable specificity of Blacks' loving, living, and doing perhaps encompasses the sense in which Du Bois' thinking was both cosmopolitan and romantic. Romantic here is no disparaging, but rather a philosophically concise term. It refers us to Appiah's lucid outline in this book of the varied influences of Du Bois' many teachers, ranging from those during his important years in Berlin, which I had not known about, German as I am, where he studied political economy and philosophy with towering intellectuals who were also important public figures, to such figures as William James or Royce in America. At all times, Appiah's book allows us to witness Du Bois' grappling. And this, to me, is what is perhaps most compelling and most moving about Lines of Descent. the chasm that lay between the progressive trajectory of Du Bois's thinking and the virulence of the political situation for African Americans in what you have to remember was Jim Crow America, is important to keep present to mind. But throughout Lines of Descent, Appiah helps us see Du Bois struggling to define race not merely in terms of injustice or oppression. Du Bois tries, in other words, to articulate something other than or in addition to the famous line from Souls of Black Folk, that to be black is to be made to feel that you are a problem. Appiah quotes Du Bois as having said late in life of the meaning of race simply, description fails. And perhaps it is wrong to speak of race at all as a concept, rather than as a group of contradictory forces, facts, and tendencies. I'm coming to the end of this introduction. It's remarkable as we watch Appiah trace the arc of Du Bois's intellectual life, historian, sociologist, essayist, memoirist, cultural anthropologist, activist that he was, to arrive with him at this statement of complexity cast as a kind of descriptive failure. For us who came after, of course, to insist on such complexity would in fact seem, if anything, to be both a descriptive and a conceptual, and also a political triumph. And to fold this long and complex stories of the ways in which Du Bois's thinking traces, in the words of Appiah's subtitle, the emergence of identity, both as Du Bois understood it for himself and his people, and as we today think of it. An emergence in the trajectory of Du Bois's thought and an emergence in the trajectory of thinking that Du Bois prepared. To encompass all this in one small-looking book is, it seems to me, no small descriptive and conceptual feat. Please join me in welcoming our guests, Anthony Appiah and Dr. Cornel West.
I want to begin by thanking Labyrinth. It's great that there are a few bookshops still left where the people who sell the books read them. and I feel very well read after that introduction. So thank you very much, and thank you, Cornel, very much indeed. Cornel and I have known each other since we were both very young.
1984.
Yeah, so it's great to be together here this evening. So I was asked just to say something about how the book came about. As you gathered, you could say that what I'm trying to do in the book is to recover the sense in which Du Bois was in fact a German intellectual and not just the American and African American and of course always cosmopolitan person that we already know. And he did, as was mentioned, he spent 2 years at the University of Berlin. He didn't get the degree there because he wasn't able to stay long enough to meet the residence requirements. But he did write a thesis, and W.E.B published it in his journal, and it's very well worth reading. It's about the development of the American Southern economy at the end of slavery and why different forms of labor regime, including sharecropping, developed as a response to the economic challenges of the disappearance of capital when the slaves were emancipated and the requirement to pay labor. So it's just brilliant. And this was, but he didn't get the PhD because he wasn't there long enough to do the oral exam. So as a second best, he went to Harvard and got another PhD. This time not in political economy, but in history. It's called The Suppression of the African Slave Trade. And again, it's a pioneering study of its subject. It's actually the first Harvard PhD history thesis ever published as a book. How did I come to think about this? Well, part of it is the contingency of life as a what Matthew Arnold called a scholar gypsy, that is someone who wanders around the world being invited to talk to people about things. I was asked to speak by the Americanists at the Humboldt University in Berlin, which is the university to which, that's what it's now called, the university he went to. And I was asked to speak in a room, the Senatssaal, where, in fact, Du Bois himself had spoken when he got his honorary degree. And the lecture was called the Du Bois Lecture. So I thought, maybe I should say something about Du Bois. And I had a long enough lead time that I was able to do a little bit of digging around to see what I could find out about which I didn't know very much about. I'd read, I think at that point I had read